Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest.
Hello, Slava. Welcome back.
Hey there, Jonathan. How's it going?
It's better. It's better now. It's better now that I'm recording, and we're not just talking
Take
for no
two.
reason. That may or may not have just happened. That's fine. We'll let you guess. Jeez.
Well, you missed me breaking the fourth and fifth wall in the previous episode.
There's a fifth wall. What's behind the doors of stone? Never mind. We're not going to talk about that. Different series. You haven't even read book 2. It's fine. All right. Great to see everybody again. Happy you're tuning in. I'm going to give a quick rundown of what this format is going to look like moving forward that we're going to try. We're going to try something new. So we are diving into the Way of Kings. We're going from Threnody in Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell over to Roshar with Book 1, The Way of Kings, the Stormlight Archives. So very excited about that. Anytime I can get somebody to read this, I'm super ecstatic because it's one of my favorite series. I have read this book, I think about 5 times now. It's gotten me through some difficult times because I really resonate with the suffering that the characters go through.
Yeah, I think Sanderson writes well, obviously. I've said that before to you and on the podcast. I've said that I really enjoy the pace of his writing and his world building. But it comes down to him as a writer. In our previous take, when we were trying to record and it didn't work out, I had mentioned how I resonated with Ciri in the book Warbreaker that you had me read for our first read of Sanderson as we were starting this podcast. And I remember you asking me, hey, so what's happening in the last 2 chapters, trying to get my feedback? And I went on and on. Ciri's doing this and Ciri's doing that, and I think this is cool and I think this is interesting. And you're like,
what about Vivina?
What about Vivina? I was like, yeah, what about her? She's like in the street with some guy doing some stuff. It wasn't exactly that.
It was similar. It was pretty close.
And the funny thing about that is Vivina's on the street, literally about to sell her body for food. But I was so attracted to the character of Ciri because I felt that I could resonate with her on so many levels. So that's on Sanderson for writing a character well.
Yeah.
Because you can write a spunky character and write it poorly.
People have done it all the time. I've done it. That's fair. So we're going to read in this book. We're going to go through pretty quickly. This book is thick, double C's. It is 75 chapters plus 3 sets of interludes, which is 3 interludes per set. So that's another 9. It's 84 chapters. It's like 90 chapters. And we're going to push through about 10 chapters an episode. Again, spoilers, always spoilers. It's going to be kind of like a read-along because Slava's never read it before. I'm super excited about it. And I've got a surprise for us at episode 10, if I can pull it off. I think I can pull it off, but I'm really looking forward to it. I'm so excited. Plot twist is just going to be Sanderson. He's going to come on the podcast.
Yay.
That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, I got a surprise for us for episode 10. And I just can't wait to get into this. I've actually asked other people to read this. One in particular was my ex, because there's things about who I am as a person that I find difficult to reveal or share because it's about how I view the world. And I feel like this book with Kaladin in particular and Dalinar in particular, the way that they view the world with kind of this warrior spirit and their sense of honor with how they do things is best shared through watching someone else's experience, because if you spend enough time with me, it will get unveiled, but we could speed the process up if I just say, hey, this book reflects things that I hold to be true, and I would love to talk about it, but you have to commit to reading it. So that's my little opener. There won't be a plot synopsis today. Sorry, not sorry. We're not going to spoil things for Slava's first read through. So, Slava, first question. Leading up to this, we've talked about this a bunch, but what's your expectation here?
Well, my expectation going into it fairly high. as I've said, really liked Warbreaker, not just because of Siri, but because I like Brandon Sanderson's writing. I'm going to sound like a broken record. I've said that half a dozen times already in this podcast. I like the way he writes characters. I like the pace of his writing. So going into this, after reading Warbreaker, and after our official first episode, reading Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, going into this, I knew I was going to enjoy it. And it started out powerfully.
Yeah, so walk us through the starting out. Where we've got the prelude, where you see Kalek, and who's one of the 10 heralds, doing something with another person, Jezrien, and there's swords, and they're on this battlefield. Like, what? Just dive right in.
So this guy, Kalek, is walking through a battlefield, and he's going to a preordained place, right? And he's going to meet what he thinks is 9 others, but he only sees one, and it's this Jezrien, and he sees that there are 8 people missing, and he's told by Jezrien that they all abandoned an oath, or at least 7 of the 8.
Abandoning the oath pact.
And another guy is somewhere where these warriors go after the desolation. So every few years,
Desolation, yeah.
there's
Raise.
this thing that happens that's called the desolation. And after they fight this battle, they all go to a place of nightmares. And they have to stay there and suffer until the next desolation. Because they die in these battles, right? So there's one guy that died, and he's in this place of nightmares. 8 of these dudes put their sword into a stone and walked off. And Jezrien tells Kalak, we are going to do the same thing. Enough is enough. We'll just lie to the people. We'll tell them that we actually won, and that might be true. It might work out, and we're all going to go, and we're done. And begrudgingly, Kalak agrees to this. They put their swords into the stone and leave.
So what are your questions? Right, this is a prelude. You know you're stepping into a long journey. What are your first questions?
I had 4 questions that I wrote down that really, that I wanted answers to. Everything else, I'm like, all right, I'll probably find out.
Yeah, it's a book. You'll figure it out.
Yeah. I'll find, even if it takes us into book 2, I'll find out.
Or 3.
But right away.
Or 4. Or 5.
What I want to know, what I wanted to know right away, who are these men and what power or magic allows them to be resurrected? And all these questions, they're tied to each other.
Oh, yeah.
So then the second question is, why are the swords significant? Because swords were significant in Warbreaker. And the little study I did on the Cosmere, which if anybody in the audience wants to do, full spoilers, but if you want to do a study in the Cosmere, Coppermind is a wiki for Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere.
Coppermind.net.
Coppermind.net. So I did a little reading there without attempting not to spoil anything for myself. I did a careful reading. And so swords and objects in the Cosmere usually have some sort of magic. And so my question here is, what are these swords? What sort of magic do they possess? What sort of power do they possess? Honor blades and char blades, as you go into the next couple of chapters, they're explained. One can change the pull of gravity. Another one has a different power. But before even knowing all that, but knowing a little bit about the Cosmere, I want to know what specific power these swords have.
Right. Yeah, great question.
Where does the power for these warriors to resurrect come from?
Another good question.
And obviously, I could sort of figure out what the Oath Pact is. They're protecting the people of Roshan, right? Some sort of pact that they made with the gods or the people.
Yep.
The leaders or the religious echelons of this world to protect them from the desolation.
Yeah.
And I didn't put what the desolation is as my 4 questions because I'm sure right,
it's a book, you'll figure it out.
The 4th question.
Oh yeah.
Is what is this place of darkness, this place of nightmares? These guys are tortured, and where is it? Probably in the spiritual realm somehow in this world, but what and where is it? So those are the 4 questions I had as soon as the prologue was open, or the prelude was closed.
Yeah, prelude, because that was the prelude. Interesting. Yep. Okay, so the prelude happens. You see something going on. You see the honor blades being shoved into the ground. You hear about the Oath Pact. We can tell that Kalek is familiar with Jezrien. he notes that he still looks regal. I forget the exact line, but he's like, but it's been a while since he sat on the throne, but he still looks as young as he was when he was king, whatever it was. So they're all very close. They've made this oath pact, and then we cut over to a new character, Zeph, Sun Villano.
Yeah,
Truthless
sin assassin.
Truthless of Shinovar. Yes.
Okay.
And he's an assassin. And then in the prologue, we watch him use powers, which is fun. And then we watch him kill a king. And we get this whole perspective of he is a servant assassin, slave assassin, for a people group, the Parshendi, who are about to make an alliance with the humans. And then moments later, they assassinate the king they just made an alliance with. What are you thinking at this point?
Let's back up for just a second.
Yeah.
Between the end of the prelude and the prologue, it's 4,500 years.
That's true.
So in my head, I'm like, all right, so 4,500 years later, there hasn't been any desolations, I guess.
Guess not. Yeah.
I guess not. And so we enter the story where there's a peace treaty about to be signed, and the Parshendi are killing the king that they're signing the peace treaty with. I can't tell you exactly what I was thinking, apart from like, oh, they're coming out soon in the prologue.
Yep. And then what did you think about the conversation between Gavilar, the king, and Zeth, the assassin?
Intriguing. I found it intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
The first intriguing thing about that whole bit, their fight, the actual assassination, is you find out that the king is a shard bearer, where the Zeth thinks the king has run away and he has to kill the shard bearer before he can get the king.
Yep.
And in the middle of this thing, he realizes, oh, wait a minute, now that's the king.
Right.
He goes and fights the shard bearer, wounds him mortally, and the shard bearer, this king, gives him a strange object and tells him to tell his brother Dalinar, tell my brother he must find the most important words a man can say. So that itself is
find
mysterious.
The most important words a man can say. Slava, what are the most important words a man can say?
I know you're setting me up for something, and I don't know. If you're setting me up for something
So we're going to come back to this, right? We're going to come back to this. I want you to just think about it. And then, maybe before the end of the episode, you can just tell us, what do you think that the most important words a man can say are? Because it'll be fun for you to just like make the assertion now. And then whenever we learn more about this sentence, we can go back and go, oh yeah, interesting, right? So, yeah, a lot of questions just between the prelude, which is, diving us into the world, right? So there's clearly magic in the world. There's clearly these big swords. There's some sort of resurrection powers possible. And then also these strange powers are happening because Zeth even notes when he meets the guards who are like, hey, stop. I'm supposed to be up here. He goes, they've never seen someone do what I can do. So these powers haven't existed for ever or for a very long time. One of the two. Who knows? But yeah, so many questions. Why kill the king? Why does he need his brother to know this very important last message? What was the object he was carrying? And when you do read-throughs of this prologue, it's really interesting how many layers Sanderson has put into little details. I'm not going to specify them, but if you've read this more than once and you've read other Cosmere books, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's just interesting. Who sent you?
Yeah.
He said, who sent you? And his guess was wrong.
Well, Zeth tells him, right? It was the Parshendi that sent him.
Yeah, that's right.
The king is confused by it.
He doesn't understand, and neither do we. We don't understand either. All right, so we've gotten 2 world-building chapters, and we're just going, something's going on here. I don't know what, but it's something, and it's big. Yeah. So then we dive into Chapter 2.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. That was a test.
Was it?
No. Tell me about Chapter 1. My notes are wrong.
Well, Chapter 1, we gotta change pace because we're in a battle, but the POV changes from main character to Sen, a recruit in the army.
Amaram's army.
Yeah, Brett Lord Amaram's army. And he's standing in line in formation and is terrified because, well, it's his first time.
Yeah.
Kaladin Stormblessed takes him into his squad, and we find out later on in chapter 3, I think it was to protect him. And he tries his best, but he ends up failing at protecting Sen, even though we see Kaladin's ability at fighting surpasses most men.
How cool was it when you saw Sen be surrounded by 6 guys, and then you're like, oh, this kid's dead. And Kaladin just shows up and single-handedly fights 6 guys at once.
That was pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. You're like, man, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
And then Sen blacks out from blood loss.
Yep. And as he's blacking out, Kaladin sees a shard bearer on the other side of the battlefield. So the enemy has a shard bearer. Wherever they're fighting has a shard bearer. And he goes to fight him. As he's fighting him, the chapter ends. And as we go into chapter 2, we're like 8 months in the future, and Kaladin's no longer a soldier.
Kaladin is no longer a soldier, and the title of this chapter is Honor is Dead. What a great chapter. More on that at some point. The chapters all have these things called epigraphs.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about...
I'm very interested in epigraphs.
So tell me about your interaction with these epigraphs.
Each one covers a man's final words.
Mm-hmm.
He says something esoteric, mysterious, and then it's noted that he said this 18 seconds before death or 30 seconds before death.
Mm-hmm.
What would you call them? Like death rattles, I guess.
Death rattles. That's what they call them.
Yeah. I was very much intrigued by them. I want to know more about who, and I did some reading on them. Not far enough to, spoil things for me, but I found out, let me find my notes. They're able to get these epigraphs because a spren is somehow able to extract these things from them, and they were written down. But by whom and how, I don't know.
Interesting. More questions. But one of the things that we see from Kaladin as a character is we know that he was a soldier. We know that he's now a slave. That's a question. We also see him start to take note that he knows about medicine somehow. And he's clearly depressed from his situation. I mean, we don't know what happened yet, but clearly not good, whatever it was. And he's demoralizing because he's demoralized because he's a slave. And then he's demoralizing the other slaves because he's tried to run away, we found out.
Yep. And it seems like whatever happened to him, I'm taking a guess at it, he was betrayed by somebody close to him. Somebody that he knew or loved or fought with betrayed him.
Seems like a fair...
That makes the most sense to me.
Seems like a fair assessment. But this slave is like, hey, let's take me with you next time you run away. And Kaladin's like, no. We can see from the internal monologue that Kaladin is also still deeply passionate as a person, even though he's depressed and downcast.
Yeah.
And then his slaver, Tvlakov, is being a dingus, and Kaladin happens to somehow have Blackbane, which is a highly poisonous leaf. So, who knows? That leads us into another new character in Chapter 3, Shallan.
She's interesting.
What do you think about her?
Well, she's a spirit, or a spren, and she takes the form of a young woman to talk to Cal.
You sure? That's your theory?
That's my theory. That's what I got from the read, that what's a spren? It's a spirit, right?
Spren is a spirit, yep.
Right. So she's a spren. She takes a form of a young woman, and she starts engaging him. And she knows that his name is Cal.
So you think that that's the character Shallan that we meet in Chapter 3?
No, that's not at all the character. Shallan is a girl who draws really well.
Yes.
And is on a boat.
I was moving on to Chapter 3. That's why I was like, what are you talking about? But yes, there is a spirit, and she talks to Kaladin.
We'll cut this in post, I suppose. Or maybe not.
It's a journey. Journey before destination.
Yeah, no, I get it. And my ego's not that big.
Mm-hmm.
So, Shallan, back on track. Shallan is a young woman on a journey.
To Kharbranth.
Yeah, to find Jasna Kholin, a woman of high stature, but also a heretic, to steal a soul caster from her.
Mm-hmm.
Because somehow this soul caster is going to help her family recover financially. Because her oldest brother is dead, and so is her father. And her other brothers are putting on a dog and pony show at home.
Classic dog and pony show.
Except for one of them who is torturing animals. The rest of them are actually working to hide the fact.
We'll get there. We'll get there. I love in that chapter where he's like, I'm the only one who came out unscathed. Tears a limb off of a crab. Yeah, bud. You're doing just fine.
Yeah. Physically unscathed, mentally on the precipice of insanity.
Yeah.
Her family, supposedly, is working hard to keep the secret that their father is dead away from the creditors. And Shallan's on her way to Jasna Kholin to become her ward in order to get close to her to steal the Soulcaster, which her father had one, and that's how he made all his money.
Mm-hmm.
His is broken. He's dead. This is her way to save the family.
So would you put yourself in her shoes? Would you ever go take a mentorship from someone that you believe to be a heretic to try to save your family?
Well, my instinct
It's an
is to say
interesting dilemma,
no.
right? Like you say no,
But put in that situation, who knows what I would do?
right?
You know?
Right?
Now, I know I would do what I could, and I know I would do what I think is necessary, right or wrong, what is necessary to save my family or to help my family. But would I choose this particular path? Maybe, if it's the only thing I saw as feasible. So yes, but instinctively you want to say, of course not, no.
Yeah,
If I believe somebody's a heretic, why would I tie myself to them in order for a slight chance to steal a thing and not get killed and run away?
This is one of the things that I really enjoy about Sanderson's writing is he takes characters and he puts them in ethical dilemmas. And they're not clean, pristine characters. They're all broken in some way or another, which we'll find out. So he takes broken people and he puts them in difficult situations that require ethical bridges to be formed to justify their actions.
Yeah.
Just like we live day to day.
Fascinating that you said that, because that now puts an extra layer on Warbreaker.
Right. He takes characters. Vivina's a great example. Vivina was prepared for her whole life. This is in the first chapter, doesn't matter. Prepared for her whole life to have an arranged marriage with a god king of another kingdom. And then at the end of the first chapter or beginning of the second, she's no longer chosen to do the thing that she prepared her whole life to do. So she was set up as one way and then released in a different way and forced to deal with the consequences of her circumstances and then make her own ethical choices moving forward. So this is, to me, one of the key strengths of the characters that we watch unfold their lives, their choices in the Cosmere as a whole. We saw it with Silence. She had to make ethical decisions for her and her kids and for what they were choosing to do. We see it over and over again in Sanderson's writing. So I appreciate that you're honest. Like, well, I want to say no. I mean, if my family's destitute, I have to do something. And it sounds like the amount of money that you can't just go and work a 9-to-5 to figure out.
Yeah,
and it sounds like the level of money. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. This is not where she could, sacrifice her weekends for 2 years at, Forever 21 or the local 7-Eleven, right?
No.
Her dad owes serious people serious money.
Big money.
Because
big money, all the whammies.
All the whammies. If you're going to transpose that into our world as an example, let's say he is the owner and he makes the Slurpees. He makes the Slurpee machines for 7-Eleven. Well, he's dead. 700 stores want Slurpee machines that they paid for, and he ain't got them. And the family doesn't have them.
And the family has to do something about it before before they're taken and put into slavery. And exactly. All right. So we meet Shallan, and she has to make a really difficult ethical decision. And we learn a little bit about her family and how they owe money. Then we move back.
Well, I have a question about Shallan.
Yes.
So the question I have, who killed Shallan's father? And is that important to the story?
That's a great question. And so I want to introduce you to something called RAFO. Sanderson, in his videos...
Yeah, I know. Yeah, read and find out.
Read and find out. Right.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, it's funny because sometimes Raffo simply means that he's not going to tell you. And sometimes Raffo means that you will find out. And sometimes Raffo means you have to wait for another book. Those are good questions, though.
The second question I have is Shallan specific. What's with the hands? One hand is free, one hand is covered, one hand...
Mm-hmm.
I forget the exact terminology.
Yeah, proprietary. Not
Yeah.
proprietary. Propriety. In this culture, in the Alethi culture, it is improper for women to show their hand. And so they keep it covered.
Both hands or just one hand?
Just one.
Why?
So some of the
Yeah.
culture stuff does get answered. Some of the culture stuff doesn't. Sanderson does this thing where it's like an iceberg. You give enough information where people believe that there's a bottom to the iceberg, but he doesn't flesh out the world the way that other fantasy authors do. I mean, frankly, I think that's why he can write so many books so quickly. He's also a chronic drafter. But when I was writing my fantasy novel with my co-author, we didn't want to go with the iceberg technique, and we tried to define everything, which is part of the reason I don't have a book, if I'm being honest. We do have like a creation story and like post-creation story, and we have probably like 2,000 years of headlines of information that happen and like key stories that take place, and that's not even all of it, right? That's just like what we put down. But we went through 3 revisions of a magic system. We have 40-something characters, thousands of years of information with like technological advances and da-da-da-da-da-da. But we got lost in the weeds a little bit where it's like, oh, well, we should make a new creature for this. And so then there's this creature about a Lockme and these orphans and like this thing that happens. And now we've seen one new creature in the world, but we got lost in the weeds because it's like, well, we want to define everything. We want it to be a hard magic system versus a soft magic system. Let me pause real quick. Do you know about a hard magic system versus soft magic systems?
No, not really. Why don't you explain it to me?
Yeah, sounds good. So a hard magic system has a clear set of rules, right? So you don't get to just say, oh, well, they solved it with magic. Hard magic solves problems for the protagonist. Soft magic causes problems for the protagonist. Not always, but usually. And soft magic doesn't have clear rules that you know going in, whereas hard magic does have a clear set of rules. We see that in the prelude and the prologue. Briefly, because Sanderson doesn't do an encyclopedia dump, he gives you a piece here, a piece there. This type of writing I would clarify as progression fantasy, where each book you see the characters from the beginning of the book have dilemmas and character flaws and whatever, and then by the end of the book they've moved through some of it. Not all of it, but they moved through some of it. And then in the next book you say, all right, well, they finished the last one, they overcame this thing, and then the next one they have to overcome another part of their personality or physical dilemmas or what have you. So hard magic systems are more defined and used by main characters oftentimes. Soft magic systems are used by antagonists, and they're very undefined, and it's just like, ooh, it's magic. So
Makes sense. That makes sense. I get it now.
Yeah. So Sanderson tends to lean on hard magic systems where there's specific rules. So some things you can't do, and some things you can. And part of his hard magic system is how his universe, the Cosmere, functions as a whole, which is relevant. So everything that you read in Warbreaker has some relevance on other books. That's not how I want to say that. Everything you read in Warbreaker, everything you read in Shadows for Silence, everything you read in... Well, I think we only read 2 at this point. But everything that you read, some of those rules are universe rules, and some of those rules are planetary rules.
Okay.
I'm going to leave...
Makes sense.
I'm going to leave that at that for now. And that'll unfold more as we read more Sanderson, which will happen eventually.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense because the shards.
The shards, yes. What of the shards?
So there's, 17 shards from what I understand, or even more. And each shard has a connection to a god in the Cosmere. And each planet has some of the shards, or a shard, or parts of a shard. So that already, to me, paints the picture you just said about hard magic versus soft magic. and then how you tied it into what connections there are in this world between planets in particular and the whole universe in general. So that's just a comment more than anything else.
Right. Good. Yeah, good comment. Interesting. The shards.
Because you got shard blades and shard plates for the soldiers. Obviously, that is from a broken shard on the planet Roshar.
Could very well be. Could very
so
well
not
be.
obviously, but possibly. You're just gonna keep me in the dark.
Raffo.
That's gonna turn into like a swear for us.
Well, storms, man. It will. One of the things that I also enjoy, I need to come up with new phrases. I just do. I like that the characters use their equivalent of curse words. Storms. Same thing happened in Warbreaker. Colors. They use slang to emphasize their internal feelings by exclaiming words that we find to be mundane.
These swear words, colors, and storms, they are almost the goddammit version of for us, right?
Yeah, they are.
In Warbreaker, colors are associated with cultic practices. I don't mean cultic as in like David Koresh cultic. I mean cultic in the actual
religious
academic,
cultic, dogmatic.
Yeah, in that academic sense, cultic practices and storms here have a religious connotation too in the Way of Kings, because as we're moving into chapter 4, we encounter a high storm.
We do,
which is a devastating hurricane-like event that destroys most things, or if it doesn't destroy things, it severely, over the thousands of years that they've been going on, have altered the landscape of Roshar. And so, because obviously the people build shelters that protect them from the high storms, so it doesn't destroy everything. And despite these things being hurricane-like, from what I read, they don't obliterate all life. Life has learned to adapt. And it has something to do with Stormfather, who is a god or a deity of some sort.
Turn every liability into advantage whenever you can.
Is that Stormfather's motto?
No. Nope. It's just a thing I heard from a general once. Anyway, Kaladin makes an enemy of Tvlakov, his slave driver.
I wouldn't say that he makes an enemy out of him, but he definitely...
Antagonizes?
Yeah, that antagonizes sounds like a good word. Because later on we see him sort of, kind of, help Cal. So, not entirely an enemy, but definitely not a friend.
So what did you think about the fact that the Windspren came back? Now, I know that we're covering chapters that you've already like read ahead just because we're covering more chapters, and this is like chapter 4, and we're going through 11 at the moment. But like when you read this about the Windspren coming back to talk to Cal, what are your questions and assumptions here?
She leaves because she's afraid she'll forget herself or lose herself. And Cal is just, I think, too much for her. He's brooding. And she's like, I gotta go. You used to not be like this. You used to fight. I might come back later. And she does come back, and she comes back, at a very, very critical moment, a crucial moment. So, to answer your question more directly, I kind of figured she'd come back.
Okay.
I'm not sure I can go into it because I'm like, yeah, she's gonna be back. It felt like
she has. We can just call her name. We learn her name in a couple chapters anyway. Silfrena. So yeah, okay. How do you, as we go into chapter 5, how do you like the going back and forth between point of views?
Oh, I don't mind it at all. I like it. I know some people might get annoyed with it or get lost. I like that kind of style. I don't mind it at all. I can't say it's my favorite, and I can't say I hate it. I just like, this is the way this author's choosing to tell the story, and I am totally fine with it.
This is the way.
The Way of Kings.
Yes. I like it because it feels like a movie. It feels like cinema. It feels like one scene to another. And you know that they're somehow going to tie together, but you just don't know how yet.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I'm
chapter
actually
5.
interested.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
I am very interested in seeing how Shallan ties into Cal. Like how those stories intersect. Because I'm assuming they will. And I think I'm assuming correctly because of what you just said. I want to know how Shallan and Kaladin meet?
No, well,
What are the
hopefully...
circumstances that intersect those stories?
Do you think that they're happening in the same time frame? Because we've already taken note that the prelude happens 4,500 years before the assassination, and then the assassination happens Storms knows when, compared to whenever Kaladin is alive, and then compared to whenever Shallan is alive.
Well, let's get to Slava's first assumption. No.
Okay.
I think what's happening to Shallan and what's happening to Kaladin are different timelines. And I think what's happening to Shallan happens before what's happening to Kaladin as he's a slave.
Okay. Why do you think that?
I can't give you a good answer.
That's fine. It's the vibe, though.
It's the vibe. Excellent choice of words. It's the vibe that I'm getting. It was just something that hit me as I was listening to it in the car.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be a non-spirit before you become a spirit.
Mm.
I'm making that assumption about Brandon Sanderson's world here.
Sure.
How did she become a spirit? And could she be a character that we already met? And if she could, I think she might be Shallan. So there you go. I actually gave you a more logical
interesting
progression of my thought.
Interesting. Yeah. What do you guys think in the comments? Do you think that Slava? Well, if you've read this book, you have to. Wrong answers only. Wrong answers only. But speaking of Shallan, Chapter 5, The Heretic, Shallan meets Yasna, and what a meeting. What a meeting.
I love this.
I figured you might have. Run us through what happens.
Yeah, so Shallan is a quiet...
Timid.
Yeah, she's quiet, she's timid. Timid is a better word. Partly because the cultural upbringing, and she's going on this quest which requires her to be the opposite of what she is. And she meets with somebody that is the complete opposite of her. She says what she thinks. She would be classified as abrasive by most people. What was the question?
What did you think about the interaction that Shallan has with Yasna? Because it was like a blustering...
It stretched her.
Yeah,
I think it stretched Shallan. Shallan, this is crap or get off the pot kind of a moment for Shallan because she came all the way here. It took her months to get to this city. And she was following Jasna from port to port because she thinks she's operating under the assumption that Jasna already gave her this wardship and she needs to find her. And so, all right, I got this wardship. Now I got to find this heretic, steal this soul binder from her, and then my family will be saved. And that's enough of a stress on Shallan. But that she gets there, and Justin's like, I like your perseverance. I like your tenacity. Next time you see each other, you can petition me. And so Shallan's now like, crap, I haven't done anything that I thought I did. It starts now.
Right.
So this timid girl thinks she's halfway there. Nope.
So do you remember when we read Warbreaker and you popped over to Sanderson's website and you checked out the annotations?
Yes. There's
annotations for The Way of Kings also.
Oh, yeah. I didn't read all of them, but
okay.
I didn't get to this chapter. I read the annotations for prelude, prologue, and the first 2 chapters.
Interesting. All right, pause on that for just a half second. So there's a second version of The Way of Kings called Way of Kings Prime. Basically, Sanderson released his early rundown of what the book was when it didn't work. So it's a totally different story with a similar flavor. But the annotations for this chapter, Sanderson talks about how Yasna and Taln, Taln is the guy that they left at the prelude, the guy who is going to be remaining with the Oath Pact, who died.
Yeah, the one who's in the Place of Nightmares.
Yeah. So in Prime, Yasna and Taln both had major sections of the plot, in addition to Kaladin, Dalinar, Zeth, and the character that Shallan replaced. But the thing never pulled together, quote, end quote, from Sanderson. But
interesting.
Yeah, so like there's just a lot more characters that existed in Prime. I've never actually read Prime. I'm a little hesitant to, if I'm being honest.
I would be.
Yeah. I just like the series a lot, so at some point I probably will, just to be like, I'm curious. Let's keep this show on the road. Any big notes about Shallan and Yasna's meeting that stood out to you, besides the fact that Yasna is a firebrand of a woman?
Nothing stood out majorly. I enjoyed the interaction.
Assumptions?
Let me see. Let me pull up my notes. So the questions was, what is a soulcaster? And what are the world-specific qualifications and definitions, I got all fancy, of heretics? So what qualifies Jasna as a heretic besides the obvious, or not believing in the religion of the land? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
The Almighty.
That's a heretic and apostate, because I think she was a believer before.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I want to know details.
Well, so you got to see what a soulcaster was, partly because Jasna soulcasts stone and transforms it into smoke, saving Taravangian, King Taravangian of Kharbranth.
Yeah, his granddaughter.
His granddaughter, right. So you got to see the soulcaster, at least in action, in part.
Sure.
And then you also know that soulcasters helped Shallan's family make money. So there's at least 2 data points for what soulcasters are at this point.
Yes. Not good enough for me, though, right?
Of course. Not this guy.
So they can turn stone into dust or smoke. And then for Shallan's dad, he was able to mine something because of it. So same principle, right?
Yep. Turning one thing into another.
Right. So, okay. But I want to know what it is, because it's not as if you told me, okay, this is a shard blade. It's a sword. It's 6 feet long. You need a shard plated armor to wield it, and it cuts through stone. It destroys diamonds. It can cut 10 men in half. I'm like, well, yeah, that's a sword. I get it. But you tell me, hey, there's this thing. You can even tell me the shape of it. Like, here's this thing. It's a square with with a handle. It grows green and it turns rocks into stone. I was like, oh, that's cool. It's called a soulcaster. I'm like, all right, interesting name. What is it, and what does it do beyond the obvious?
Patterns.
Yeah, it's the same pattern in my questioning or principle when I say, yeah, I get it, Jasna's a heretic because she doesn't believe in the religion of the land, but what besides that? From a Christian perspective, right? How would the church brand somebody a heretic? Well, it's not necessarily because you disagree on so-called denominational points, right? Something that's unique to denomination. But if you deny the Trinity, if you deny the deity of Christ, if you deny salvation being achieved by Christ on the cross as the sole way that a person is saved, if you deny those 3, most churches, irrespective of their denominational stripes, they will say, okay, yeah, that's somebody that is a heretic. That is somebody that's teaching, not only denying something, but teaching contrary to the faith that's been handed down through generations. So, based on that philosophy, that understanding, what makes Jasna a heretic? So, what makes a soulcaster? What makes Jasna a heretic beyond just denying the faith? I guess, what does a ward do besides the obvious? Like, I know what a ward could do.
Right.
But, like, what is Shallan really tying herself to? How big of a risk is she taking? I'm interested in that. When pressed and when she feels free, she's a firebrand too.
Yes. Yeah, her mouth is that of a sailor from time to time.
Yeah, that's it. I don't want to belabor it. I don't want to just, I don't want to crawl up my own butt and start, philosophizing about this stuff. But those are the questions.
Things will be revealed. One of my favorite chapters, right here. Chapter 6, Bridge 4. Oh, I didn't even get into this. There's a quote from Chapter 4 that I wanted to mention that happens at the end. It's, Kaladin wants to try to find his way back to the man he had been, a man who had cared. So, fast forward, Bridge 4. There's another line. One final torment the world had reserved just for Kaladin, and it was called Bridge 4.
Beautiful. Dude, I had to pause, and I'm not exaggerating. I had to pause and go, okay, Sanderson, well done, sir. Well done.
There's lines like this.
Dude.
They're great.
They're great. And there's one in Chapter 13. I won't say it here, but I almost can't wait till Chapter 13 to talk about it.
Right. See, I knew you were going to enjoy the book because it's a little slow on the front end because you have all these questions, you have all these assumptions, you don't know what time it is, what's going on, but it's about to pick up, and I'm real excited. All right, so Bridge 4. Tell me what you thought about Bridge 4. So Kaladin, they get to the Shattered Plains.
Sounds like a good movie title, right?
Movies are coming.
This chapter alone could be a movie. It could start with Kaladin bloodied, dragging a bridge.
Yeah. So he's all the bridges are under the jurisdiction of a character named Gaz, who's just kind of a skeevy man.
Yeah, a little bit.
And then for several hours on his first bridge run, they have to carry the bridge from chasm to chasm to get to where the Parshendi are at, and then they take a volley of arrows where they're running headfirst into war. And the whole thing is everyone around him is dying. And then the bridge gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And you keep running because you have to keep running or they're going to kill you anyway. And so it's this, I see it as this really great analogy for life. Sometimes you're running headlong into suffering, and the people, your friends, they turn on you. The people around you no longer support you. They get busy. They're too busy to reach out. And life becomes even more suffering because people around you are dropping like flies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even just Kaladin's thoughts. You think he's at his wit's end or the end of his rope after he sees a fellow slave being bludgeoned to death just because the slave drivers didn't want to deal with giving him extra water. He's processing a lot, and here he is pushing this bridge, and he's one of the few that lives over and over.
Which sounds like hell, literally.
Exactly.
So, on that note, and we're just going to tie together Chapter 9 called Damnation and Bridge 4 because they're both about Kaladin, and I'm as we've been doing this episode, I think that maybe this is what we'll do moving forward to keep these episodes closer to an hour. We see Cal walking up to the honor chasm.
Yeah.
Thinking about killing himself.
Right.
And the skeevy guy Gaz takes a minute and for whatever little bit of respect he can offer, he does. He just goes, just leave the vest and the shoes. Right?
Yep.
But then he stands there, and who returns?
Our friend Syl.
And what has she got with her?
She brings him this poisonous plant and gives it to him because it made him happy when he had the poisonous plant before. He wasn't sulking so much when he had an instrument that he could kill the slave driver with.
Mm-hmm.
So she brings it to him and says, like, hey, now don't kill yourself. Here's a flower or a plant. And he's like, what the hell is this? Why are you bringing me this? She's like, oh, don't you like this plant? I saw you
Yeah, you were happier back then when you had this.
Yeah, when you had poison in your pocket. I thought it was a good scene.
It's cute. It's fun. It's right. It is cute because it's Syl, but it's also real. It's this moment of choice and a moment of smoldering coals without hope, and then something happens to spark the flame again, right? So the honor chasm is the place where men go to die. You couldn't be that man again, but he could learn from that man. It's one of the lines. Kaladin Stormblessed was dead, but Kaladin Bridgeman was of the same blood descendant with new potential. So he goes back and he rallies the bridgemen who are also just waiting to die, basically. He makes the joke, well, we're going to have a hard day tomorrow, from Teft, whose name he gets. And Teft's like, well, how do you know? And he's like, because we're bridgemen, and every day is a hard day.
Yep.
There's a lot of funny lines that you'll enjoy here as things go on.
And that's definitely a joke that a military man would say.
Yeah.
It's almost gallows humor, but not really. It's kind of approaching gallows humor.
Yeah. Any questions or assumptions about Kaladin Stormblessed? Well, Kaladin Bridgeman. Let me correct myself.
Because I read the interlude, I know who he is and where he comes from.
Well, I don't think you mean the interlude. I think you mean there's a chapter that we didn't talk about with a flashback of his past, where he's a surgeon. I mean, comment on that too. I'm just trying to get us.
Well, he got his wish, right? He got his wish. When he was a kid, he was destined to be a surgeon, just like his father. But there are things about his father Kaladin didn't like, even though he respected and loved his father.
So say we all.
He wanted to do something greater with himself. He wanted to do something honorable. Mm-hmm. And in his 8-year-old mind, I think he was 8 in that story, he wanted to be a soldier, to do something good, to protect. And his dad, a bit of a pacifist, so I hate him already. You shouldn't go looking for a fight, but sometimes you do have to fight. And so he gets his wish. As we see in chapter 2, he's a damn good fighter,
He is. He is.
right?
There's a Chinese proverb, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So your
So
assumptions and questions.
my assumption is that he is going to some degree, he is going to ascend back to his former stature. He might not be Kaladin Stormblessed in the strict sense, but I think moving forward, he's going to win over not only the men on Bridge 4, but he might even have success farther up the echelons of that army. Or he might escape and we'll find him in a bar somewhere with his slave markings carved off.
Ooh, woof. Yeah, that would be something. Oh boy.
Look at assumptions. I'm just
Right.
I'm not reading anything ahead except for general
No,
world knowledge.
Yeah.
Reading just portions enough to give me an understanding of the world that I'm in. That's one assumption I'm making. I think it's the interlude. That's where we meet a guy in a bar.
Yeah.
That has.
We'll get into the
scars on his
interludes later.
forehead.
Let's go back to Shallan real quick before we wrap up the episode. Shallan has met Yasna. Yasna turned her down. Shallan goes back. She meets Capsule. We learn a little more about Shallan's past. And that was chapter 7. Chapter 8 is Nearer the Flame, where it notes that Yasna is the finest living scholar. And Shallan, in a last-ditch effort, buys some books to try to help her really get home, because she's got nothing to lose. Like, if she doesn't help her family, they're
Right.
all dead.
Well, why is she buying books? I think that's an important thing to tell her listeners. Yasna tells her, like, yeah, you could be a ward, but you don't have enough
Her
knowledge
education
in
was
history.
lacking.
Yeah, in history and logic.
Yeah, Yasna scolds Shallan. Your parents didn't prepare you. Your knowledge is lacking. You haven't read these authors. And then Shallan's like, well, I didn't have an education, so
She goes to buy a book and eventually convinces Yasna that her pursuit of knowledge hasn't been, flighty, or she hasn't been lazy. And despite the shortcomings of her family,
it's hard fought. Her scholarship is hard fought.
It's hard fought, and she's self-taught. It's hard fought. And that proves to Jasna that she is worthy to be a ward.
I was really hoping you were going to write a poem. Just a really quick. It was hard fought. She's self-taught. She keeps going no matter what.
Yeah, see, we'll fix it in post.
Oh,
There'll be a
boy.
poem here.
Oh, boy. All right. So, assumptions about Shallan and questions, and then let's wrap this bad boy up.
Assumptions about Shallan. I think Shallan is not going to get the soul catcher at all, or it's going to take it longer than expected. And whatever, that's not going to end well for Shallan. She is not going to save her family.
Oof.
That's my assumption.
Right. Oof. Okay, cool. So
when you say oof, are you just throwing me off course just to not tell me that I'm almost right?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure. The audience, if they've read Sanderson, they'll know. They'll know what what I am and am not affirming, if I'm leading you astray or helping you identify patterns.
Yeah. Well, I think it's Shallan's life is not going to get easier.
How do you really feel?
It's not going to be like, chapter 17, she steals the soul caster, goes back and, fixes everything for her family. I don't think it's that. And that's too easy anyway. That wouldn't be good writing.
You're not going to fill 1,000 pages with that either.
Yeah. I think Shallan is in for a very difficult road, and it's not going to be the difficulty in stealing the soul caster. It's going to be the difficulty in what happens as she does and the fallout from that.
Right. Well, it's not rocket science to say that all these characters are littered with suffering for their backgrounds, and then it's fair to assume that their futures are also going to entail some degree of suffering. Otherwise, it wouldn't be drama. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a book. So you're right. She is going to suffer. And you're right, Kaladin is going to suffer. What did we read earlier? There's one last torment saved for him, and it was called Bridge 4. Woof. All right, so that's it. Chapter 11, we're caught up. We're going to try to speed this up next time by maybe just consolidating the characters and their journeys regardless of chapter specifics, just so that we can try to keep this to an hour. But what are your feels, your vibe? How are you feeling about the story so far? Seems like you like it.
I do, dude. And I hate to sound like a fanboy because I'm not.
You are now.
It's 3 for 3 for me with Sanderson, and I kind of knew it was when I read Warbreaker. I was hooked from the first chapter.
The prologue.
And I told you that.
The prologue, so good.
Yeah, even the prologue. Oh yeah.
It's funny, Vasher thought. How many things start with him being thrown into prison? That's the opening line.
That's a good line.
It's so good.
I mean, you can always find a hater to throw shade at that, but that is an objectively good line.
It provokes all the questions, and you go, wait, what? And then, yeah, the prologue.
And Nightblood. Dude.
Oh, Nightblood. I can't wait till we talk about... Warbreaker is probably like a 2 podcast episodes.
Yeah.
Because it's not very long.
What I want is Warbreaker 2, Ciri and Nightblood go on a vacation. Sounds like a rom-com.
Lord. All right, but come back to Roshar for a minute. We can get back to Nalthis later.
The point is with the side quest into Warbreaker is I knew I was going to like this book because Sanderson already hooked me on his writing with Warbreaker. Then we read Shadows for Silence.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, 2 for 2. And so going into this, I knew I was going to like it, and I wasn't disappointed. I am intrigued by Shallan and Kaladin, excuse me. I'm intrigued by these characters. I want to finish the journey with them.
Journey before destination. Exciting. All right. Thank you for tuning in today on SideQuest Podcast with a look at The Way of Kings, Episode 1. Next episode, we're going to look at the interludes 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to go up through Chapter 17, which is roughly 6 chapters, 9 total. We will speed it up next time. Thanks for tuning in to the hour-and-a-half episode this time, where we went a little more piece by piece. Let us know, if you're on Spotify, there's a button that says reply. Let us know, is this too in-depth? Is it not in-depth enough? Would you listen to 20 episodes where we go slower and we really dive into each chapter a little more regularly? You let us know. We'll keep doing it. I can't wait. There's so much about to happen. It's exciting.
Yep. All right, good people. Goodbye.